So I'm going to do one other quick story, my very fine friends, as we close out today. I want to just briefly touch on, you probably saw in the news, there was an incident between an officer and a young black man in Philadelphia who had a knife. The 3 officers, I believe, involved ended up shooting. So there's, and that incident, I'm not passing any judgment on whether this was a justified shooting or not, but it has sparked violence in Philadelphia, where the incident occurred, but also in Brooklyn, which is not next door to Philadelphia. Brooklyn, New York had rampaging riots also. And I raised this story because we have, in this year of 2020, we've been talking many, many times about all of the incidents of violence and riots in this country. Seattle being a huge center of it, Portland, really every major city in our country, Dallas, where we are, Minneapolis, just all over this country, all this violence. And it's part of it's one of the big issues on the 2020 political discussion, the American political conversation is, you know, why are these happening? How do we stop it? What do we do? And I just wanted to mention about these. It's obviously, you know, everyone has to believe in the idea that in America, to have justice, it means we have to have investigation when there's shooting by officers or any other shooting. We investigate, we understand the details. If there is a determination made that the person was not justified in the shooting, the officer or the civilian was unjustified, and then we pursue a criminal remedy. I'm sure that will happen. It happens in every officer involved shooting in this country. Hyper alert now on officers, knowing they're going to be investigated for everything they have done. The point of my last segment today is not to criticize or not to even pass judgment on whatever happened in Philadelphia, because I believe the officers will be investigated and someone will decide whether or not it was justified. What I do want to say is this. For people to be arguing that these kind of shootings happen and no one cares, no one investigates, is false. A lot of the violence in this country started this year because of the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, which everyone saw on television at the time or online, saw the incident. Basically, everyone was just horrified, disgusted, very, very upset. When the system works as it did, the officer was investigated. There are now charges against the officer. I raise all this to say there's really not a reason. No one claims America's perfect. No one claims America's police are perfect. But we do have a system in place in this country to investigate officers and anyone else involved in shootings and then decide if charges are justified or not. But the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis allegedly sparked all of the violence that we saw across this country. In fact, you may remember the day after all that incident, I had Star Parker on the show. Star called me at like 6 in the morning that day. She said, I can see what's happening. And it was the day that the Dallas riot started, called and said, I want to talk to your listeners. And she talked about the justice system and the need to not buy into this. As I've said many times, it's not a black versus white issue. It is not a racial issue. If the American people get drawn in to thinking that all of the violence in this country and the riots is because we have a black versus white issue, you're playing into the left's narrative. The left is using these incidences to try to divide America. But on the 2020 elections, why I brought up the riots happening right now, still happening around this country, is there was a brilliant piece yesterday in the American Thinker by the wonderful attorney Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell representing Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. She wrote a great piece. I urge you to go to our website to read it. My website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under shows, drop down, list of links. You will see this article by Sidney Powell. The gist of it is that it is insane in this country that given the year we have suffered through with all the violence we're watching in the American cities, that somehow people think that if you vote for Vice President Biden, the violence will end. Or that somehow President Trump is to be blamed for the violence in America's cities. This is a left-wing smear of the president, a left-wing attempt to blame him for the riots, which are in fact not at all due to President Trump. They're due to left-wing agitation, encouragement of the riots to continue. You never hear one Democrat denounce them, say that this needs to be stopped. You don't hear what they're happening in Democrat-run cities, in Democrat-run states. You don't hear even the vice presidential candidate Biden or Kamala Harris denouncing the violence, denouncing the property destruction, the arson, the burning of cars, the murder of police. You never hear them condemning it. It has to be crystal clear to Americans. The left owns this violence in the streets of America. It is insanity to try to blame President Trump for the violence happening in America's cities. But this is what the left is doing, what the media is trying to do, is float the idea, if we just can elect Biden president, we can push Trump out, all the violence will end. And that is not true, my friends. That is not true. And even if you thought it was true, it is like negotiating with a terrorist. We do not surrender to violent people in order to make peace, give them what they want. We cannot do this in this country. The president has done enormous and wonderful things, as you were hearing a moment ago in our interview with Keenan Williams, enormous things to be helpful to black community in America, through the funding of the traditionally black colleges, through the opportunity zones, providing jobs, opportunity through school choice so kids can get a better education. Issue after issue after issue, President Trump has blessed America, including the black community, and the left is trying to spread the idea that somehow everything bad that's happened, including COVID, but we can't go there again today, and all the violence is somehow attributable to President Trump. I say Americans are smarter than that. We're much smarter than the left gives us credit for. We're not going to accept somehow blame of President Trump for what's occurring in the violence of the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement and the Marxist Antifa movement that are funded, organized, and fomented by the radical left in America. I know I'm way past time, and my happy producer, substitute Derek, is looking to look in here and say, "You ever going to stop talking?" But I do have one more quick question, actually, while Keenan's still here. So how do you answer people? I mean, you kind of touched on it, but, I started the show today saying, why women should vote for Trump. How do you answer people who just say, everyone knows that black Americans vote Democrat? What's wrong with you? How could you not support the Democrat Party? I know you touched on it all, but
the vote is not about black or white. The vote is about freedom. It's about policies. I asked them to vote. If you were to have a conversation with God, who do you think he would tell you to vote for?
Well,
okay, let's get away from the emotions. Let's get away from, because here's the deal. Our president is very different.
Personality-wise, especially.
He's very different. He's not the average president. He's not presidential. He is a leader. At a time such as this, if we didn't have a leader and we did have a president in there, one of the guys that stood up straight, he said all of the right things. He was very partial, and he just was that guy. The left would run over this country right now. We would be in trouble. God knew we needed a New Yorker, a businessman who was very direct, who was not caught up in his emotions, and would make the right decisions for the American people. He is doing everything that he can for all Americans. And what I share with people, you got to understand, President Trump does not make decisions for Republicans. He makes decisions for Republicans, liberals, Democrats, agnostics, Hindus, and Buddhists. He is a leader.
For Americans.
He makes decisions for the American people. He is not partial to that. He makes decisions for the people. The decisions to make sure that we make money here, that we keep our freedom here, that we make sure that we have police officers here. Sure, there are bad apples in every bunch. There are bad preachers, there are bad teachers, there are bad pastors, there are bad police officers, there are bad politicians. There's someone somewhere that's not right. But he is doing a great job of filtering that. And for him, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. If you're not doing the right thing, he is going to expose you, because that's the type of president that we have. And I appreciate him.
Great answer.